Ready, Commissioner?
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to the December 16th, 2019 meeting of the Oregon Transportation Commission. Welcome all those who are watching on simulcast and all those who are in attendance today. We appreciate your being here. Beautiful day. Happy holidays to everyone. So we're going to begin the meeting as soon as I get the agenda in front of me. There we go. I knew it was around here somewhere. All right, we will start with the director's report. Director Strickler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I have just one item for the director's report today. It's a rather lengthy item just to give kind of background and context. But the item is our partner project to tackle impaired driving during the holidays. ODOT, Lyft, and Portland Police Bureau have teamed up to tackle impaired driving during this holiday period, and I want to describe just a few of the things that we're doing. ODOT, Lyft, and the Portland Police Bureau have teamed up to tackle impaired driving, and in 2017, it became clear that impaired driving became the top cause of fatal and serious injury crashes in Multnomah County. Fatalities caused by impaired driving in Multnomah County increased from 31 in 2016 to 44 in 2017, which is an increase of 42%. Drug-involved fatal crashes increased 75% in the county from 2016 to 2017, from 12 to 21. The Governor's Highway Safety Association and Lyft started partnering in 2018 to encourage the use of ride-hailing as a safe alternative to driving impaired. In collaboration with the Safety Division's Impaired Driving Program Manager, Region 1 applied for and was awarded a $20,000 grant to offer $10 Lyft credits from November 22nd to January 12th for Fridays and Saturdays only between 6 p.m. and 2 a.m. to both new and existing Lyft users. This Lyft credit campaign will be targeted to East Portland and identified problem areas, and the Oregon Liquor Control Commission list of drinking establishment that impaired drivers involved in crashes named as the place they had been drinking prior to the crash. Patrons of these bars will be targeted with social media geofencing in order to target mobile devices that enter the boundary. The hashtag #Don'tDUIItPDX will be used to claim the discount, and users will receive the message, "Your Lyft ride is here courtesy of ODOT and the Portland Police. Thank you for caring about your community." The grant will provide at least 1,000 rides, so up to $10,000, while $7,000 will be used for social media ad placement and $3,000 will be used for the geofencing work. The $20,000 grant will be matched by ODOT with $7,530 in grant administration, media planning, geofencing, public relations, and safety classes for Lyft drivers provided by the Region 1 Transportation Safety Coordinator. All of the creative works provided by Lyft, and the ads will be sponsored by the Portland Police Bureau and both ODOT and PBOT, highlighting the program for their social media platform. Mr. Chair, that concludes my remarks, with the one exception that I'd say clearly this is an important topic for all of us as we enter into the holiday season, and one that I hope expands further in the future, and one that I hope those in this area take advantage of.
Thank you, Director. Any questions of the Director on his report? Okay, we're going to move on to public comments. I have 3 people signed up to provide public comments. Let's start with Jody Parker. Do I have that right? Okay, welcome. Thanks for coming. Tomorrow, maybe we'll move those seats up so we've got you in the same zip code that we're sitting in over here. But welcome. Thanks for taking a long walk. Okay. And you have to turn on the microphone. This little red light comes on.
I have that.
Very
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you.
And by the way, we have a 3-minute limit on individual comments, so we'll be running the clock here in front of you so you can keep track of your time. Thank you.
I appreciate you making me ever more so nervous. Thank you. You're okay. Thank you for having us down to this beautiful city for this Transportation Commission. Thank you for bringing us to this peaceful city. See, I'm already messing up. So my name is Jody Getzlow Parker. I work for and with the laborers. We're a statewide organization with 2,500 to 3,000 members that work throughout the state, 1,850 approximately in the Portland metro area. I have come down to speak about the Rose Quarter. Oh God, it has a name and I've totally dropped the ball there, but I think it's a widening project.
I think we call it the Rose Quarter Improvement Project.
The Rose Quarter Improvement Project. I appreciate your help there. I want to thank you for any considerations, and I just would ask that you look to the white paper, I think provided by Mr. Strickler there, and go to the last questions. And I just would like this project to continue to move forward in a direction that helps our stakeholders get this choke point repaired. I know that there's some pushback about the Harriet Tubman School. We just rehabbed that. I was actually a part of that with the construction company, not the air machine rehab, but the general, and I was very proud to be a part of that. But I do believe that that unit, the huge unit there, was installed to offset the potential, all the fumes and stuff that are stuck there when we're, trapped in traffic and stuff. I thought that that was the cure for this, and I'm a little dismayed that, there's some pushback and some slowing down of the project. So I would just ask that you, take a good, honest look at everything and proceed with optimism and encouragement. Thank you for your time, and I came in a little early.
Thank you very much. On time and under budget, that's the way to be. So thank you very much for coming to the meeting and for your comments. Okay, David Burrell, I'm mispronouncing your last name, apologies. You can straighten me out here. Welcome.
Hi, my name is David Byrell, and I'm chairman of AMPO. And first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for...
If I could just, here we go. The clock wasn't going. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone for the funding for the transfer site in Millersburg. I think it'll help the traffic on I-5 and help the region, so much appreciated. And then my concern is sustainable revenue for transportation. With more electric cars and more fuel-efficient vehicles, I see a decrease in gas tax revenue coming in, and the addition of registration fees for electric cars and a tax on purchase of bikes the amounts don't seem sufficient to offset. So I'm wondering if there's a plan coming in place to put together some sort of a sustainable revenue system for transportation that would encompass all users of the system to contribute fairly. I think we need to take a look now, because the way transportation's going, gas tax isn't going to be sustainable. So I'd just like that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we agree that we have to be looking at alternative sources, and we're doing that, and we'll continue to. We've been spending some time this year on revenue funding resources and avenues, and recognize we're living in a time of change in terms of how these systems are likely to be funded longer term, and are looking at that. So thank you for your comment. The last person we have signed up to provide, not last in terms of importance, last in terms of on the list, is Bob Courtwright. Bob?
There we go. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm Bob Courtwright from Salem. You have a letter today. I'm here today to encourage you to take immediate action to redirect the support that ODOT provides to metropolitan areas to help implement the statewide transportation strategy. I think you know that there's a broader effort underway among the 4 state agencies to address this issue, to come up with long-term recommendations. While this broader long-term effort's necessary, it's not a substitute for immediate actions to help metropolitan areas. It's not a substitute because immediate direction from the Commission is critical because existing metropolitan plans and updates are taking us in the wrong direction. Plans are generally not addressing GHG emissions and will do little to reduce either VMT or emissions. And we not only know that metropolitan area plans need to change, we know, importantly, how they need to change. That is, by substantially expanding transportation options, transit, walking, cycling, and by planning for compact mixed-use development to reduce the distances people need to drive. ODOT plays a key role in facilitating this change because it provides substantial financial assistance to metropolitan areas to conduct planning. But currently, ODOT's providing very little support for the implementation of the STS. Last month, your staff told you that they have one modeler to help metropolitan areas implement the STS, and that providing additional funds is something that the agency would have to think about. I want to suggest that there's more you can do in the interim. I'll highlight that in a minute. Again, next month, we understand you're going to get a briefing from four agencies talking about the statewide transportation strategy. And again, we think that's appropriately directed at a longer-term discussion. I know stakeholders will be very interested in hearing that discussion. But at the same time, I think you should ask the staff to come back with a list of things that can be done in the short term, immediately, to make progress. And I highlight 3 in my letter. First is suggesting that you adopt a policy statement to authorize and encourage and direct the staff to start implementing the statewide transportation strategy now. That kind of statement and direction from the Commission is needed because until that's in place, your staff and stakeholders are bound by the policies that you've already adopted that don't really address this. Second is to ask the staff again to look specifically at the funding and assistance we currently provide to metropolitan areas and look at ways that existing assistance can be redirected. And third, as the governor mentioned in her letter to you almost 3 months ago, look at performance measures. The statewide transportation strategy identifies the direction we need to go and how to get there. It provides very good performance measures that can help lead metropolitan planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I will report out, and Chris can comment on this as well, that we did have, I thought, a very fruitful and a good discussion in our first meeting. All of the commission chairs from the 4 agencies and the directors of those departments met earlier in the month, and I thought we had a very good meeting, and we're scheduled for another one soon, I think in January. So I know the point of your comments was on immediate actions, not on that, but I just thought I'd mention that it was a productive and I thought favorable beginning. Chris, any thoughts on that?
I would just concur with the chair's remarks, simply that we're getting together. We recognize that we have to have more detailed conversation to move plan into implementation, and so that's part of the dialogue in front of us. And we'll be continuing that over the next few months as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thanks for your comments. Enjoy the holidays. Okay. That concludes the public comment section of the meeting. We are going to move on to a short decision-making presentation and action item from Eric, Planning Manager at ODOT, on Connect Oregon. These are not the Connect Oregon projects we've been devoting so much time to this year. This is another and different Connect Oregon project. So Eric, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Van Brocklin, members of the commission. For the record, Eric Hovig, I'm the Policy and Planning Manager for ODOT. Chair Van Brocklin, you nailed it. I am not going to be here to talk about the intermodal facilities where we spent so much time in the spring and summer, but I am still talking about the Connect Oregon program and specifically the dedicated projects that came out of House Bill 2017. As you recall, in House Bill 2017, there were 4 dedicated projects called out. You have already taken action on 3 of them, so I'm here with the 4th. So this should be the last one out of House Bill 2017. House Bill 2017, the fourth project, was called for a siding project along the UP Main Line. Originally in 2017, it identified a location around the Brooks area. After working with Union Pacific, specifically our rail section staff, Hal Gard and his staff, worked closely with the Union Pacific. They determined that there was a better location at Oregon City to locate this siding. And again, this siding was primarily to benefit passenger rail service. That was what was identified out of the House bill. So in 2019, during the legislative session to modify and update the House Bill 2017 requirements, that location was changed from the Brooks area to Oregon City, and that happened this summer. So now Union Pacific has brought forward their project plan. As you recall, you're familiar now with project plans. This is your fourth one you've reviewed. And they had to do that per the statute and the requirements, and we need to take action by the commission before the end of this year. There was a statutory expectation that action would be taken before January 1 of 2020. So the timelines were short. We're cutting it right to the edge for your approval. So I'm here to ask for a conditional approval of the project plan that was submitted by Union Pacific. And I want to just talk a little bit about why that conditional approval is being recommended. The project as called for is a siding project to improve service for passenger rail for freight trains and passenger service so they can bypass each other more efficiently. The chosen location in Oregon City is an existing siding that is needing upgrades and repair. And the amount of repair work that it needs to actually turn it into a functional project as identified by Union Pacific is more than the funding available out of the Connect Oregon program. They were awarded $2.6 million out of House Bill 2017, and the overall project is well over $5 million. In working through ODOT rail section and Union Pacific, we have jointly put together an application for a CRISI grant for federal rail to hopefully make up that differential. And that's what this recommendation really is about, is a conditional approval of the project plan conditioned upon ODOT and Union Pacific receiving that CRISI grant to make up the shortfall. Because the basic expectation and understanding from Union Pacific Railroad is that without that money, the siding project really would not have the functionality that they deem would be beneficial to passenger rail without that added infusion. That sentiment was also validated by the Oregon Freight Advisory Committee. We used that committee as a final review group to look at the project plan. They came to the exact same conclusion and recommendation from Union Pacific. So with that, I will entertain any questions before we move for a motion.
Commission questions? No? Any questions? Okay. You're looking for a motion?
We need an action to approve or conditionally approve the project plan so we can move forward. If you do conditionally approve the project plan and the CRISI grant comes to fruition, our approach will be to move directly into the IGA phase with Union Pacific like we have with the other three projects. If we are not successful in getting that CRISI grant, then the conditional approval would need to come back to you to make sure that we want to invest that $2.6 million at this location at this time.
Do I have a motion?
I move for conditional approval of the passenger and freight rail improvement project, the Brooklyn subdivision, Oregon City siding project, conditional on the CRISI grant award.
Thank you, Commissioner Callery. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. It's been moved and seconded that we approve this motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank
Thank you very much.
Our next item is on organizational changes at the department level. Director Strickler, could you walk us through those?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I wanted to bring a few things before you today, some by way of context and then the other elements of explanation for how we find ourselves or where we find ourselves in today's transportation market. Starting first with House Bill 2017. House Bill 2017 put a significant workload in front of this agency and this commission, and that is no secret to you for all the work that you've been doing over the last several years as we build towards some of the delivery efforts that we have in front of us. That is not all we do, though, is deliver projects. We do many other things, as you well know. And so one of the things since I've come on is we've started having conversations around what does it look like to build a structure that would help inform the future of the agency, really combine functions, maybe look at a way to bring a functional org chart to the agency. The goal of that is not just change for the sake of change. In fact, quite the opposite. The goal is to design a process or an organizational structure that will allow us to meet the goals, delivery goals of House Bill 2017, meet the demands of the other elements of the agency work that we have across the board, whether that's DMV work, whether it's collection of revenues through motor carrier, or whether it's combining and aligning a government relations and communication strategy as we go forward. We have many things that we want to accomplish as an agency, and I've been working with you on this for a little bit. And what we have in front of us today is the consideration for a shift in some of our structure. Per ORS 184-620, we need to bring, per 184-620, the director may appoint other officers or employees of the department. And then in addition to that, language in House Bill 2017 defined that major structural changes would be part of a commission decision. And so that's why we have this in front of you today. A little bit more on the why. Findings from our 2015 McKinsey report, as well as input from you, really demonstrates that we have an evolving transportation industry in front of us. And it's not just the McKinsey report, but it's all the input that we receive, whether it's a project-based input or other conversations that we have out in the community. We also have a rapidly changing environment of connected autonomous vehicles and other things as it relates to new technologies coming into the industry that really force us to adapt and be prepared for a future that isn't here yet. In short, we're looking for an organizational strategy and an organizational outcome that will survive a 5 to 10 to 15-year window, as opposed to something that is triaging in the moment right now. Along with this discussion, I wanted to give a background in how and why, again, this organizational structure would help to accommodate a shifting future and help to set a vision for the agency. I'm suggesting that we create 4 new positions, an assistant director structure that better aligns around the function of the things that we do. And maybe I'll just walk through each of those individually and then answer any questions. The first is an assistant director for finance and compliance. That would be responsible for overseeing ODOT's primary licensing, customer service, and revenue collection groups. It would oversee Department of Motor Vehicles, Commerce and Compliance Division, which is formerly the Motor Carrier Division, Office of Innovation, and then consolidate our Office of Finance and Budget into a single place. Right now, it is located in multiple places throughout the agency, and this effort would align those functions all within the same group and the same structure. Those functions would all be performed under the single assistant director for finance and compliance. The next one is assistant director for government and external relations. I mentioned earlier, really trying to align our legislative strategy and our communication strategy into a single proactive, comprehensive approach as to how we communicate things that are important for the agency, but then also for the public around us. All external facing agency efforts would be coordinated and aligned through this approach, and department strategies for external engagement would be seen as proactive, coordinated, and effective, and increasing our agency partnerships as we go forward. This would have government relations and communications really being driven under a single assistant director that would then help combine that comprehensive message, and that would have cross purposes across other assistant directors. The third would be an assistant director for operations, responsible for overseeing the alignment and integration of the system and the departmental operations. Position would oversee the former Highway Division, former Transportation Development Division, former Rail and Public Transit, and formal Central Services, as well as the Safety Division. It would also oversee some of the work efforts through urban mobility and mega project delivery, an office that we've begun creating to address some of our needs that would be reporting directly to the director. We began the recruitment process for that a little over 6 months ago. We had interviews last week, and while we don't necessarily have candidates to name today, we're optimistic about our efforts going forward for the Office of Urban Mobility and the oversight of tolling as one of the strategies as we look forward. Again, all of these things, as we look to align these efforts, are aimed to look forward and really be visionary for the agency and adapt to a future that has yet to be placed in front of us. We want to help and be more proactive in some of those discussions, and that's what you see here is an alignment of all of the operations, the operational aspects of the work that we do under a single assistant director. And then finally, an assistant director for social equity. This is new to transportation, or at least new to our Department of Transportation. Not that an attention to detail as it relates to equity and inclusion, but that we would raise this position to an assistant director level, and they would be responsible for creating policy and leading efforts that are focused on recruiting, retaining, and training all of our teams to understand, represent, and look like the communities we serve. It would expand our efforts to responsibly provide contracting opportunities for disadvantaged business owners, and would improve the alignment of our transportation decisions within those communities that we've historically maybe not always made the best decisions in. The goal of this assistant director is to really bring our level of awareness to a place where, frankly, all of us have an opportunity to grow. The other thing I'd say, and then entertain any questions clearly, is that these 4 assistant directors would be looked to jointly lead agency operations and outcomes along with our division administrators. Our division administrators would still have clear authority over their divisions, but they would be reporting through a consolidated structure that would allow us a little more synergy. These 4 assistant directors would demonstrate cross-group cooperation, maintain accountability and ownership of agency success, and as important as any of the things I've said, be empowered to act on behalf of one another when setting agency direction. In essence, when I'm not present to make a decision, these 4 assistant directors would be there and able to make decisions collectively for the agency. Purpose of this is to empower people and allow us to continue to move forward with speed and create bandwidth so that we can look forward in the future and create a vision for the agency where we're in step with the evolving world that's going on around us. So maybe I'll pause there and see if there's any questions that I can address.
Commissioners, questions for the director?
Real fast, thanks, Director.
Vice Chair?
That evolving world you just alluded to, I'm curious as to whether or not that evolving world, what from your perspective, what role that will play on the overall system of transportation as a whole? And that's the first question. The second question is, have you learned from or seen any other agencies that are working in some of these paradigm shifts to accommodate to those changing paradigms, I guess, out there in the community as it relates to transportation?
Yeah, absolutely. 2 things. So I guess the first is what is the evolution that I'm talking about? Part of that is an evolution in our understanding. One of the comments we heard about earlier was our approach to climate and the impact that transportation has on greenhouse gases, for example. It's trying to institutionalize this in all of our operational functions, and how do we bring modal choice? How do we bring accessibility? How do we bring different modes to bear in a way that is truly comparable to somebody getting in their single occupant vehicle, especially for those discretionary trips? Those types of things are the things that we want to start driving towards into the future. And I want to be clear that these are not things that are either new as of today. And they're also not things that are new to the staff that you have leading the divisions at this point. But it's a new way of coordinating and cooperating within that coordination in an effort to adapt to that, to make sure that we're driving some of that acceptance and change as we go forward, as opposed to reacting to it. When you look at other DOTs and you look at organizational structure, I can tell you that no 2 DOTs are exactly alike. But one of the things that is consistent as you look at some of the other departments across the country that some of them do actually align in a functional way that's very similar to what we have here, and also empower and delegate authority to the right level so that agency operations can continue when somebody else is not there to make a decision. That's an important factor for an agency's health, succession planning, and for living out our values as we go forward. So it's designed to do many things at the same time. And I can tell you that there are a few DOTs, even along the West Coast, that have a functional organization both to our north and south as well.
Follow up? No, I'm good. Commissioner Smith, questions? So, Director, my questions are around operations and finance. So we're a very large organization, almost 5,000 employees, very large budget, a lot of responsibilities all over the state. And we're also an organization going through a period both internally and in terms of how we face external challenges that is going through rapid change. And I anticipate that will continue. So most organizations of our size going through that kind of change have a COO and a CFO. Is that contemplated in this, either in this stage or in a future stage or stages of transition in terms of how we're organized?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, to answer that directly, yes, it is accommodated, and that's the perfect segue into what the future evolution of organizational structure could be even beyond today. First and foremost, when you look at a COO, that's a Chief Operating Officer in charge of all agency operations. What you see is that some agencies, though, for example, let's use our partners to the north, WashDOT, they don't run their DMV or our equivalent of a DMV, for example. That's done by the Department of Licensing. And so their typical COO structure really does focus on the operations of the things that they can directly affect on the system as opposed to the licensing functions that would come with another agency. So we've designed this Assistant Director for Operations to be that quasi-COO of all those operational functions, but clearly separate from the DMV and the motor carrier functions that are there. So then you look at the finance function, and what we have identified right now is a finance lead that is part of that commerce and compliance and revenue, and the revenue and finance portion of the agency, that functional side. We could certainly evolve to a higher level CFO at some point in the future, and some organizations do that. Where we sit right now, we think that combining the functions is likely the first step in having a more robust discussion for that going into the future to really help consolidate those functions into one area. The last thing that I'll say is that when we look at the Assistant Director for Social Equity, because I don't think I completely addressed the earlier question, this is a new position for us, and it's also a new position within DOTs to address it this way. I can't say that it doesn't exist somewhere else in the country, but I can say that as contemplated, I don't know of a DOT that's doing it in this way.
One follow-up question, I think Commissioner Simpson may have another question. Anytime an organization is going through change in its structure, it has the potential to create some anxiety among the people in the organization. And just speaking for myself, I'm sure the rest of the commission, we have deep regard for every single person who works at ODOT, and certainly our senior leadership team. So I hope there is good communication going on. I assume there is, knowing you, to reassure people that we value all of our people and we value our administrators, our department heads, and this doesn't change that. This, as I understand it, is largely intended for the purposes you described and allows you to have maybe a fewer direct reports so that you can do other aspects of your responsibilities and delegate maybe in a more efficient way than in the past, given the changes that are going on, the growth of what we're facing, having to be working in new areas. So could you just talk to us a little bit about how you're assuaging any concern about these changes among our personnel?
Yeah, I can do some of that here, Mr. Chair, and then also describe how some of the conversations have gone. First and foremost, any change, especially one that gives the presence of this type of significance, is clearly something that takes a little bit to absorb, and everybody absorbs at different rates. I also would say that we've got a highly talented group of division administrators that are leading significant efforts for our agency, and we wouldn't be where we are today without them, and we'll need them going into the future to kind of continue to spearhead this effort as well as many others that they're already working on. I don't want to say that everybody is completely on board and understanding, because that wouldn't be fair. I don't want to speak for others, but I can say that I'm committed to ongoing conversations with them to really describe what it isn't, because it's not an overtaking of authority. In fact, all of the division administrator authorities are still there. It's an effort to create bandwidth so that we can pull conversations together in ways that we haven't been able to yet, because of either bandwidth or because of just the connection hasn't been there for good reasons to date. Those conversations are going to continue. Any organization that goes through change needs to recognize that the change actually happens from the moment you send the announcement, not necessarily all the moments that led up to it. And so the change is occurring at that point. Literally, I just announced last week that pending your approval, we would be moving forward in this fashion. And our work is in front of us to continue to make sure that we have an understanding of what each of these changes is intended to do, and more importantly, as I mentioned, not intended to do.
Thank you. Commissioner Simpson, did you have another question? Commissioner Smith?
You sure?
Yeah.
All right, and one more follow-up. Now, so 3 of the 4 positions are going to be appointed individuals, and obviously one is going out for recruitment here soon, it looks like.
Correct.
Or if not already has, around social equity. I'm curious if you could just elaborate a little bit on your desire to pursue a role like that. And then furthermore, for the collective group of assistant directors, are there a set of guiding principles or values in terms of how you intend to lead these individuals through the department to ensure that there is a synergy in terms of the outcomes that we're striving to achieve as a state DOT? Is there a platform you're looking, a playbook you're looking to run off of?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to make sure that I captured the first question correctly. It's my feelings about creating the Assistant Director for Social Equity in the foundation as to the why. Was that the first question? Okay. Let me start first with the playbook, because I think the playbook is actually part of the answer to that, and then I can certainly dive into more detail there. The playbook is we have a lot of priorities and we have a lot of things that we are here to serve. And as you start to look out at the transportation sector, not only in this state but across the country, the customer is really who we are here to serve. So we're here to serve the public. And that's all of us in this room, and that's all of us that are working towards really creating a better environment for the customers that use the system. It's also an effort to really blur some of the lines of the system. The public, I believe, doesn't necessarily, I don't want to say they don't care, because I'm sure they do, but they don't necessarily target their trips based upon what system they are on. It's a function of choice for them, and so we have to provide those accessible choices to them. Now, that system could be a different mode, for example, and they do care about that, and we should care about that. And as we take our work forward, coordinating those efforts so that we can bring those into closer alignment and provide those choices for those that want to use other modes can do that. And so really it's about creating choice and recognizing the customer. So at the highest level, we've tried to start a dialogue around narrowing our priorities to really 4 general areas. The first area is increasing our awareness and understanding of diversity and social equity within the agency, and then also our workforce development efforts to do that. So that's talking about it, that's recognizing where we have moments to improve, and that's being honest about those areas where we need to train workforce, train ourselves, and have open and honest conversations. The second one is to look at sustainable funding and sustainable revenues going into the future. We know that the gas tax has a declining buying power at this point, and it's a declining revenue source. And so we have to be planning for those options, especially as, again, the available resource shifts and changes over time. The third is we have to look at safety and operations and use technology to kind of help us in the safety and operations of the system itself. What I mean by that, put more succinctly, is that we have available capacity all over our system at certain times of the day or within a certain geometric space, and we have to look at ways to operate and use that facility and that system and that asset to its maximum extent, while also recognizing that technology can play a significant and important role in minimizing our carbon footprint and really helping to shift to other modes and helping to provide those choices so that those other modes actually compete with the SOV, for example. And then we have to be intentional about addressing congestion and have a conversation around what that means. That does mean increasing modes. That does mean increasing conversations around, maybe in our urban centers, for example, having a conversation around bus on shoulder availability. Those types of things that are available in the market of transportation tools all across the country, but we haven't employed here yet. We need to tap into some of those resources so that we can do a better job of managing the congestion we have. We should be approaching our investments from maintain what we have to maintain the asset so that it doesn't become a liability, improve safety as we go forward to the extent that we can in specific locations, operate the system better and manage the demand associated with that. And then at the very end, after you've had the opportunity to look at those 4 areas before it, look at strategic capacity expansion in the areas where you need it to free up some of those bottlenecks. It shouldn't be that any one of these by themselves is the only solution. So as we look at the game plan and we pull these assistant directors together, those are the priority efforts that they'll be looking at as we start to make some of these decisions. The other is the purpose of the assistant directors is one of the statements that I made early on, which is, and this gets to specifically the game plan, it's empowering them to act on behalf of one another when the other's not there. The goal of that is to speed up our ability to make decisions to the extent that we have the authorities to do so within the agency. It's meant to intentionally provide opportunity for bandwidth so that we can look out into the future a little further instead of always putting out fires. It's also intended to really target an intentional succession planning effort to show that we don't necessarily just have one deep in a certain specific area, but that we're going to build capacity across. So we're really looking at these 4 to work together and to create a synergy of a matrixed organization, which is relatively new for us. And so that's the effort going forward. When we look at the Assistant Director for Social Equity, the reason it's important to me is because, and you've all heard me say this before, I think anything we're not intentional about, we just won't do. Not because we're bad people, not because it's not an important thing to do, but because when you're not intentional about it, you lose sight and you get busy because we all have so many other things going on. I think we need to be intentional about diversity, social equity, and inclusion in a way that creates a conversation that maybe not all of us have had. And that's an awareness in the types of decisions that we make within certain communities. It's an awareness in the opportunities that are available to a competing workforce. And it's an awareness in the different areas of the state and whether or not we really do look like and represent those communities. I hate to be repetitive, but those 3 values or those 3 bullet points as it relates to creating that position are important to me and are an important part of our decision-making. If you don't house decision-making for something as important as people, which is what I view that position to be, if you don't house it at a high enough level, then it becomes a secondary thought. And we want it to be a primary thought in the decisions that we're making all across the agency.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. Looking at the 4 positions, it's clear that, taking the social equity, this new position, the other 3 have some very discrete kind of, you belong in this silo, for lack of a better word. How do we make sure that we integrate the Assistant Director for Social Equity in the rest of the departments in such a way that's meaningful. So it's not, we have a director that's doing social equity over here, meanwhile, we're doing our business over here.
But nobody has to listen, right? That's a great question, and that is one that actually plagues positions like that elsewhere as I've seen them kind of evolve. And I'm not suggesting in Oregon, I'm just saying in general. What's important is the setup and the matrixed organization of the assistant directors. So it's that authority piece and having the authorities present within those positions in order to cross-reference the things that they're doing. The other is providing enough of a positional authority within the position so that when decisions are being made about recruitment, for example, that we bring that person and the policies they create into the discussion so that they have the authority within the organizational structure to make decisions that might demand a change in how we do something. They may review it and they may say, we don't need a change in this area, and that's the skill set that we want them to bring. But they'll have the authority to influence that change. I'll take an aside for a training that I had, and I looked at a very specific, and this was about 3 or 4 years ago. I looked at a very specific position announcement, and when I read the position announcement, I thought, I know exactly what they want in this position, right? And as I walked through that position, it became crystal clear to me as a person what I thought the important priorities were as it relates to qualifications, experience, et cetera. I was sitting next to somebody that read the same exact position description and read about 12 barriers as to why they didn't think they could ever qualify for the position, even though they had the same qualifications as me. And so the barriers are things that we have to talk about, and even as simple as the things that are written. And we want this person and reinforcing that conversation and creating policies that help us to see, even though we are all well-intentioned and we're doing everything we can in order to create a space of equity, that not talking about it, not having a position at the high enough level to help make decisions across the enterprise or across the agency creates a bit of a barrier in and of itself. And so that's the importance of the matrix organization and providing that oversight that will go into the other divisions as well. The other thing I'll say is that as we start to align these around functions, the division administrators have been doing a good job of coordinating so far. What we're asking is even more intentional coordination, especially in some of these areas about access and availability.
Other questions? Commissioner Brown.
Just a comment. Director Strickland, I want to thank you for, in a very short period of time, coming up with a concept that we as a commission have struggled with. I think that the governor appointed each one of us in the recent years to change the look of the commission and to change the look of ODOT and what we were doing. And when we selected you as our director, I was surprised that you were able to come up with a concept so quickly. Obviously, you've been thinking about this for quite some time and lay it out in such a precise manner. And I think that this is really an indicator not only to the people that work for ODOT, but also to the public, that ODOT isn't going to be doing business the same way we've always done it. And so I just want to thank you and commend you for your effort.
Thank you.
Anything further on this by way of discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Do you want me to?
Go ahead, Julie.
So I would like to make a motion to approve amending the Oregon Department of Transportation's organizational structure at the executive leadership level as presented today.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I'm going to take a 10-minute break right now before we do the consent calendar, because I understand from Mr. Finn that the governor has just recently, in the last few minutes, sent us a letter that we need to read. So we're going to do that, and relates to the Rose Quarter project, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. governor wanted made. That wasn't made, so she's pulled it back to make that edit. And so it's not quite here yet, but it's coming. So I suggest we do the consent calendar. Equally as riveting. Right? Of course. So,
right.
Mr. Director, lead us through it.
You bet.
And again, I will not be participating. Let me just get this on the record. I have my law firm represents a number of entities which are involved in right-of-way acquisition matters with the department and are kind of sprinkled through this month's resolution on right-of-way acquisition. So I am going, in an abundance of caution, declare a potential conflict of interest with the entire right-of-way resolution and recuse myself from consideration of just that one segment of the consent agenda, and I am available to vote on the balance of the agenda.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, given that potential conflict, let's pull consent item 3, and I would ask for a motion from the others to move forward consent calendar item 3.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Commissioner Calery moves, second.
Second?
Second, Commissioner Smith. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd now ask for a motion on the rest of the consent calendar in block, those being consent items 1, 2, and then 4 through 13.
I thought we just did that, and now we were doing the consent calendar. Was that was that the right-of-way resolution?
The right-of-way resolution was number 3, consent item.
Okay, so that's what we just did?
Correct.
So I think we need to redo that so I cannot vote, because I misunderstood. So let's go back and redo the right-of-way acquisition resolution without my participation. We're correcting my mistake right now.
So moved again?
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? I am abstaining. I am abstaining. We had too many people on the line. I am abstaining. Okay,
There we
Chris,
go.
there we go, on the record.
Okay,
I
so now,
abstain.
I would ask for a motion on the rest of the consent calendar at this time, in block.
Is there
consent
such a
items
motion?
1, 2, 4 through 13.
Everything but 3.
So moved.
Commissioner Smith moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Brown seconds. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We are not going to recess for the day until we find the governor's letter. So hang on. We're going to go into recess for however long it takes to get the letter so we can read it. Thanks for your patience. Okay, thank you very much for your patience. Tom, are we back on? Okay, great. So welcome back. Thank you for enduring that longer than expected recess, but we're back in order now. We have a letter from the governor. I'm going to borrow this for a second. Thank you. And the letter recognizes the importance of the Rose Quarter project. This is a letter from Governor Brown to the members of the Transportation Commission, to the 5 of us. And certainly, it begins by recognizing the importance of the Rose Quarter project to safety and to congestion relief and to promoting safety. It goes on to talk about the critical need of congestion pricing and the importance of working with our regional partners. And we certainly intend to continue to work with our regional partners and have from the beginning. And we need to now kind of re-loop back that we have the governor's letter with them. And certainly intend to work with them all the way through the project and always have intended to do that. The specific request that the governor is making in her letter, I will read, and that is that, quote, "I request the commission table the decision on the environmental review path for a few months and focus on completing work that we've been discussing with the local governments." And so I think the decision we have before us is how we feel about that, if we're comfortable doing that. And if so, I think what that would do would be change the meeting tomorrow from a decision meeting to an informational session. And we would certainly proceed with the informational briefing on the project. And we would take comment from anyone who chose to be here, understanding that given that we're close to the holiday, people may or may not want to come for the informational hearing, may want to wait until we get to the decision point. So with that, I guess I would open it up for comment by the commission with the proposal from the governor's office be that, again, that we table the decision on the NEPA path for a few months in order to complete some outstanding items in coordination and consultation with Portland area governments that we've been meeting with and nonprofit entities and others who've been involved in the process. Comments from the commission? Commissioner Smith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm inclined to listen to what the public has to say to us tomorrow before making a decision whether or not to make a decision. I mean, I'm mindful of the governor's input. Obviously, we need to think about it and contemplate some of the points that she makes in here, but I could be persuaded otherwise, but it seems to me that we have an agenda set for tomorrow. It is a hearing on a decision. I'd prefer to leave it that, and so we can hear from everybody, not predetermining whether or not we're going to make a decision.
Yeah, and that's certainly an appropriate choice. I think the only argument on the other side, if people were going to come down to testify because they thought we were going to make a decision, and we decide today that we're not, that notice might be helpful to some people. So, you know, it can go either way in terms of how you manage it, and I'm comfortable going either way myself.
My thought is, I want to hear from people.
Yeah.
We've gotten several letters, but I think people, it's important for them to be heard. And the governor's request is to hold off on the decision for a short period of time.
Yes.
And so we need to hear from those folks anyway. So let's hear from them now, because I would really like to be able to have a very deliberate but not drawn-out process going forward. Every month we wait in making a decision costs the public a lot of money.
Yeah, so that's a good comment. Let me ask Director Strickler, is there a notice issue if we've noticed it for a decision, if we choose not to decide the question tomorrow, we're simply, I guess we would simply just hold it over for a future date.
So I believe the commission has the authority to carry over decisions, and so that's certainly within your purview.
So that would just be a continuance of the process and the continuance of that subject on our agenda. So other thoughts about that or anything else?
I guess the question is that we're supposed to make a decision. This could be the decision that we make, correct?
It
To
could
hold
be-
it over?
It could be to continue it.
So
hold it
if
over.
we move forward with the process of allowing people to speak to us tomorrow, and we decide that we want to move forward with the recommendation from the governor, then we could do that as part of our decision-making.
Yes, that's true. Commissioner Calery, further comment on that point, or do you have a new one?
No, Commissioner Smith very nicely encapsulated what I was concerned about. I just don't want to see this project linger for a year or less. We've got an issue that we've got to solve. It's coming together with the Columbia River bridge replacement, tolling. It's all a big package if you look at it that way, and I think we do. So a few months delay until we hear from some other parties, I guess we can live with, but I sure don't want it to last much longer.
Commissioner Simpson, anything to add?
I would probably second the direction folks are interested in pursuing. I don't really have that much to say at this particular time related to the specifics, just because I've been heavily involved in this process. I'm not going to say I'm optimistic entirely, but I will say that I'm definitely interested in listening to what the public has to say on record in front of us in a public setting, because I think that's vitally important. And I mean, who knows? I mean, there's two potential avenues that we could be considering in terms of what relates to environmental review, and maybe the alternative is the best solution, you know, and that's to be determined tomorrow by hearing from the public of what's in the best interest, not only of the state and its needs related to this project, but most importantly to the community at hand that's voicing a lot of their concerns. So I definitely think it's going to be important that we continue to proceed as is and listen and not encourage people or not provide an outlet for people not to show up to voice their opinions. I just think it's really important to hear all that on record.
So those are all very thoughtful comments. Thank you all for making them, and I understand what you're saying, and I see the value of it, and that's the way we'll do it. So we will be here tomorrow. We will conduct our agenda, and it includes a segment, I think it's scheduled for about 45 or 50 minutes. Obviously, if we need longer, we'll take it, to hear from the public. And then, so all are welcome. And then we can take that input we receive tomorrow in public testimony, along with all of the other information we've received and comments we've received, primarily by letter, including the governor's letter, and then we can decide how we want to go, how we want to proceed. So does that sound acceptable? Everyone? Yes. Good characterization? All right. So we have no other business before us this afternoon, so unless one of you or the director has something else that he needs from us this afternoon, we will stand in recess until, is it 8:30? Is that when we're getting back together? Yeah. Until tomorrow morning, 8:30, this room, and we will proceed with the remainder of our meeting tomorrow. So everyone have a great night, and thank you all for attending.